Yeah, exactly.
One of the concerns that we're looking to address with all elected members around this table as we move towards the unitary plan decision making is to make sure that all of you have got good advice at the time, and I've referred to this before in the lead up, that independent advice available to all elected members about their position in terms of any conflict. That will be an option available to all members. Somebody voting today on this motion, that would be one of the matters that you'd expect to be raised in that context, as to whether it could be seen to be a predetermination or bias. We can't draw a conclusion on that because it will also be in the context of other matters that we don't yet know will unfold between now and your decision making in August on the unitary plan. But as from an organisational perspective, and the matter that Stephen and I have addressed, and the motivation for providing the information in advance of this discussion, is really to bring the bigger picture about its integrity of the unitary plan decision making itself. We want to ensure that there is least legal risk of anyone who's dissatisfied with the decisions that are made in August having an avenue to raise a challenge through way of bias. So that will be something that will be important to every member around this table.
Yep, that's good. Okay,
A second question for Chief Executive. How much did the advice cost?
Can I
Don't have the bill yet, so I don't know.
It's mounting up.
Yeah.
Stop asking questions, Kathy.
Okay. Right, Councillor Ross.
It cost 30,000 plus the unitary plan.
I'm going to disappoint some people by indicating I'm not going to support this motion, but I'm actually really interested in this conflict of interest, in this predetermination. And Catherine, could you, because we got the strong advice when it came to the out of scope, withdrawing the out of scope provisions for the unitary plan, that if you voted for that, you could show predetermination. If you voted against that, meaning you supported council putting it out of scope without consultation, isn't that also indicating predetermination? Can you not get whacked on the other side just as much as you can on the other side, both sides?
I cannot exclude that possibility.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor.
So in this context, for example, depending on where the discussion goes, one option would be for the notice of motion to be withdrawn, to not put anyone in that position.
Thank you.
Yep. Just to reflect on the advice that's been given thus far, we presently, without the notice of motion, do not sit in a conflict situation. None of us around the table do. And just to recall, because this is an important discussion, so I ask you to give me a bit of latitude here, but just to recall that I have said from the very early stages of this, in fact I was talking about this 5 years ago, we want to arrive at the decision making with all of us intact, yep, and all of us being able to be participating in the discussion. So that is why it's timely and useful to actually get this advice. And so I've got Councillor Dick. Next, please.
Yeah, just a question to Meredith Connell. Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Property Council?
Yes, the firm, a number of individual lawyers in the firm who work in property law have been members for some time, and understand that last year that was converted to a global corporate membership because it was more economic to do so. And yes, our lawyers do go to property council events, and they use it as a professional education and networking organisation. We are also members of many organisations such as the Law Society, so it's on a par. But I can reassure the councillor that has no influence whatsoever on our legal advice.
You never declared that though, did you?
Shouldn't that have been declared?
Well, the question has been asked, and it's a fair question.
No,
it's been answered.
When we got the written advice, should that conflict, if you like,
I'm happy to address that, Mr. Mayor. It has a law firm's membership of these kinds of professional organisations cannot have any bearing ethically and professionally on the advice it gives, that would be a breach of our professional duties.
Should have been declared.
That's fair enough.
Well, hang on.
That's a good answer.
Lawyers are not above the law. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Right, councillor Wayne.
Sure. Just got a question. First of all, I just acknowledge the comment that you make about the merits of membership being determined by officers rather than councillors. But the issue that concerns me, that goes to perception, is what we've had recently is a situation where the Property Council has been directly critical of councillors. On the 15th of February, they put out a media release, the title of which was "Local Politicians Politicising of Proposed Auckland Unitary Plan Appalling." And I could generate a number of quotes from that. Certainly around the legacy that various councillors leave behind, references to election year, scaremongering, and so on. So this was openly critical of councillors, in my opinion, and this is my opinion. It was not correct, because it's second-guessing why I voted and why other councillors voted a particular way, which essentially was around process and issues of natural justice and fairness that we made very clear at the meeting. So here we have one instance where the Property Council, in a media release, has been openly critical of councillors. And I guess the question I would ask is that sort of thing appropriate, and would the chief executive and the officers look at our membership of an organisation like that and any other organisation and question whether, frankly, our council should be a member of another organisation that is openly critical of certainly members of the governing body here? Is that appropriate?
Okay. Yeah, councillor Wayne, I think the best person to answer that is Stephen, because recall it's his responsibility to manage the relationship. Steve?
Look, I think through you, Your Worship, there are a number of organisations that the council and or CCOs are members of that make statements that are favourable of council and quite critical of council. It's in the nature of the purpose of those organisations. I think, I can think of the Chamber of Commerce passing comments about the council and its perceptions and impressions of our of our performance.
My favourite chamber.
The Employers and Manufacturers Association would be another. So, as the decision maker, we obviously we reflect on, how is an organisation that we're a member of discharging its own purpose, and is it one of the things that we would think about is do we see it acting in a fair and even-handed way? And we can't expect that all of the organisations that we're associated with will be saying things that councillors and staff might find always to be favourable. That's part of our open democracy that we live in. If we had a membership of an organisation that appeared to be running a campaign that was counter to the purpose of the Auckland Council and our goals and objectives, we might reflect on that differently, and we might also have some informal discussions with people about is this the right thing for us to be involved in? Since I've been your chief executive, I haven't had occasion to do that with an organisation, but it may happen in the future, who knows?
Okay, just have a couple of questions relative to this. Do we have any guidelines in place for how we handle circumstances where there are, I would suggest, very objectionable comments by an organisation of which we're a member, particularly an instance where, as I say, it is targeted directly at councillors.
Councillor Wayne, it's just not councillors.
That's part of the job.
I mean, if I were to
But
take
yes.
umbrage at every time some organisation around Auckland decided they didn't like what the mayor was sort of doing in terms of the city rail link or something or other, and they've all had various comments. And, you know, so there has to be some scope for robust debate. And I mean, we're members of the EMA, we're members of the Chamber of Commerce.
We buy the Herald on a regular
Yeah,
basis.
we buy the Herald on a regular basis, absolutely. So,
agree with
you know,
us.
there's got to be some scope for a bit of give and take in the public domain. And, you know, so I accept the fact that you feel slighted, you know, but what I think has been proposed here is the fact that, you know, you shouldn't allow that to necessarily impact on your judgment in the overall scheme of things.
I can assure you,
there's got to be
it
scope
doesn't
for
impact
robust
on my
debate.
judgment.
Oh, good, that's great.
My question to the Chief Executive was around whether we have any guidelines in place so that when there is something that's pretty obvious, that's directed at council, that we would at least have some engagement on our part, because I don't want to be seen to be engaging with the property council, because if I did that, somebody might say, well, gee, you're showing a conflict of interest in the like. So I'm really not in a position to do that, but I would suggest the organisation is and should be on our behalf, particularly when there are matters that I would suggest are factually incorrect.
So you're asking the CEO for his views on what he might do in the event that it's over the odds.
What guidelines do we have? How do we handle this kind of situation?
Well, so we don't have it, through you, Your Worship, we don't have any written guidelines about what to do. I can imagine that would be, require an encyclopedia of helpful hints. So look, we're using our experience and our judgment. There have been a number of occasions where we will meet with an organisation to express our view about their view. That is what you would expect in a business-to-business relationship. In this particular case, where you're taking exception to something that's being said about you as a councillor, you know, as an elected leader of the council, I don't actually see any problem with you engaging with the property council and telling their chief executive that you don't like what they had to say. I mean, I can't see any problem with that. Again, as long as you're clear that you've thought about you know, the issues going forward when you come to make decisions.
Yeah, Councillor Wayne, is a cause of action. Councillor John.
Can we speak to this item now, Mr Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
no, hang on. No, sorry. We're going to have Councillor Mike and Councillor Kathy speak first. We're just basically dealing with questions at this time. I've got the next question is Councillor Cam.
Oh, thank you. My question is, if we removed, or if the mover and seconder were to remove the reference of unitary plan, i.e. that the governing body, in recognition of the council's statutory planning role and in order to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, direct the Auckland Council's corporate membership in the Property Council New Zealand be terminated, full stop, without giving a formal reason and without formally citing the unitary plan, would that lessen any potential legal interpretation that of councillors' predetermination or bias on the Property Council's position on the unitary plan?
No, it will not. It doesn't remove the issue at all. It's simply by virtue of the political arm effectively making decisions on corporate memberships. You could substitute Property Council, any other entity. It's simply by the mere fact of a political decision about corporate memberships places each member around this table in the position of risking a later allegation of predetermination or bias in relation to matters relating to that entity.
Right.
So it's a general, general governance approach. It would be a matter for the chief executive to exactly immunise the people that are in a governance role from any such concern.
Very good.
Mr Chair, I suppose I put it